Welcome to Rebuilding a Club That I Am Not Managing Part 2, where I am the manager of Manchester City and we are attempting to rebuild Crawley. After Part 1, it did take 5 seasons, but we were able to get Crawley promoted from Sky Bet League 1 and into the Championship. And as a reminder, at the beginning of this save, Crawley were projected to finish last in League 1. They did get relegated, but we have given them essentially enough money and enough loans to finally get them promoted from League 1. So in part 2 here, we're going to be trying to tackle the championship. Moving into Season 6, we're going to be using Man City's massive financial backing to hopefully be able to support Crawley in their quest to get promoted into the English Premier League. But we're going to use this balance, we're going to use this transfer budget to hopefully help out Crawley. I'm going to play the off season here, and we'll see how we did. All right, I have played through the transfer window for season number 6, and we've essentially just gone the route of giving Crawley as much money as possible. We spent £15 million on 5 players here: Sean Burgess, Connor, Charlie Gill, Thomas Kempshall, and Sonny Cox. The reason that we spent £15 million on all of these players is because it's the maximum that our board will allow, and they weren't in the first team squad. They were in the under 21 squad for Crawley. They weren't going to be playing in the first team, so I can just shell out money for them and it'll be fine. And then we spent an additional £122 million on various players that they've had who were either players who were going to be sold, were transfer listed, or were in the youth team. So overall, we've given Crawley about as much money as they could possibly use. They've only used £22.5 million of it, but they have signed a lot of players here, all of whom will hopefully help them in the league. They've brought in Kalen Casey here, which is interesting because I think he's actually a pretty good player for this level. 15 jumping reach, he's got good technical attributes, he is an upgrade on their defensive positions. They've just signed him. For some reason now he's transfer listed. I have no idea why. They literally just signed him on July 5th. For some reason he's transfer listed now. They spent $1 million on him. But he is a good player, so if he plays, I think he'll be good for them. They've also brought in Gabriel Biancheri. I think he's a pretty good player as far as the winger positions are concerned. I do like his physical attributes: 15 pace, good acceleration and agility. So hopefully he'll add a bit of physicality and creativity to the wide positions. Ryan Andrews comes in as a wingback for them. Overall, very solid player to fit into the wingback role. He'll play in that defensive right position very nicely. We've also given them a player on loan, Will Jenkins-Davies. I don't know if he's the best player, but I think he'll be a squad player for them, or at least help to fill out the squad in a very busy championship schedule. He can play a lot of positions too, especially in the middle, and I think he's solid in the middle. He's not particularly great physically, but he's got good mentals, good technicals. I think he's the type of player who can help them as a squad player, but is at the end of the transfer window where they seem to do their best business. They signed Johnny Wallace, who is a very interesting physical player. 16 acceleration, agility 19, pace 15, stamina 16. He's playing on the widths, not great technically, not great mentally, but great physically. It'll be interesting to see how he does. After that, they brought in Hindolo Mustafa on loan. Another plays in the same position as Jenkins-Davies, another very interesting attacking player, but again, a player whose physicals I like and better mentals and technicals than Jenkins-Davies. Sam Tickle comes in as a new goalkeeping signing. He'll rival Callan McKenna, who's another player we have on loan at Crawley. He'll rival him for the goalkeeping position. Sam Amaya comes in on loan from Everton, a player who I think has a very bright future and is very good in the present. Good dribbling, good pace, good acceleration. And then finally, Hayden Roberts comes in to play the left wing back position, another player who should move into the starting lineup and do really well. But this is what Hassan Suleiman has them going out with, 4-2-3-1, with some of those new signings moving into the starting positions. And as far as the schedule is concerned, it's been a bright start in the championship in their first season. Home wins versus Sunderland, Carlisle, and Bristol City. A few draws in there as well. But overall, looking at the Sky Bet Championship table, they're in 8th place, and overall, doing pretty well as far as their first season is concerned. And we'll take a look at these at the end as well, but just so you guys can see as well, training facilities are great, youth facilities are great, but fairly basic youth recruitment and average academy coaching as well. So we'll take a look at all of that once this rebuild has come to an end after another 5 seasons. The nice thing is, as a Man City manager, we're still doing all right. It gets tougher and tougher to continue to make sure we're doing well with Man City as we get further into the rebuild, because I'm not doing any scouting or anything for Man City, and I'm pretty much pouring all the resources into Crawley. So it is getting more and more difficult to make sure this team is still good, but fortunately City starts out really good, so I haven't had to worry about it too much. But hopefully we'll still get City over the line for the next 5 seasons so that I don't get fired in this 5 seasons. With that being said, this is season number 6. Let's move forward to the end of the season and see how we did. And after that great start in the league, Crawley finished in 15th. Not bad, but not great. So looking at the schedule throughout the season, looks like it ended up being a bit of a rougher start. October wasn't great. November wasn't great. December was really, really bad. And it looks like January wasn't great either. But moving from February to the end of the season, it looks like they were able to rack up a lot more wins. So things seemed to get better as we moved into February. Looks like a part of the reason for that is they made some January signings. So Iheanacho here, he's not very good, but he came in at the beginning of January. It looks like they brought in Paul Griffiths. Paul Griffiths is a good signing. He's a good young center back. He could develop with this squad and end up being really good. They also brought in Gustavo Hammer for some money. A bit slow, but a good player as well. They've also brought in Joe Gelhardt. Joe Gelhardt, I already know, is a good signing. They definitely needed someone to play up top as well, too. So glad to see that they brought in a striker. And then finally, they brought in Dion Burrell on loan. They also needed a striker. I don't think he's quite as good as Gelhardt, though. Yeah, they're definitely going to need Gelhardt next season because, man, 13 matches, only 3 goals. So they really need someone up top who can really bang in the goals for them. They just don't have, like, it's definitely a goals by committee approach, but I'd like to see them have a truly great striker that scores maybe 20 goals in the championship and helps fire them to promotion. Well, City things are still looking good. We won the league and Champions League, so that means we do move into season number 7. I'm going to play through the transfer window, and we'll see what we've got in line for Crawley moving into season 7. All right, we are through with the transfer window, and I saw this in a comment on the first video. I thought it'd be fun to give a try. And we have done our first part exchange deal with Crawley. We have paid £15 million for Jonathan Gurns, who is just kind of some random youth player that we've brought in. But we have given Crawley £15 million plus Evan Clark, who is one of our under 21 regens. Overall, he's not the greatest player in the world. Honestly, it's really hard to do these part exchange deals with Crawley because a lot of my under 21 players don't want to go to Crawley. I tried to do a couple other part exchange deals with players like Divin Mubama, but it didn't work because Mubama didn't want to go to Crawley, so it ended up failing at the contract stage. But Evan Clark was one I was able to give them. He is a good young player. He's got 15 pace, good agility and balance, and good dribbling, so I think he's one who could improve and hopefully help them maybe in season 4 and 5 of this rebuild. But it was a lot of fun doing this type of deal. Otherwise, though, we pretty much just, once again, spent a bunch of money on Crawley. We spent $45 million before the turn of the season and spent an almost additional $94 million on their players. So they've got a lot of money here. I do think, though, in this transfer window, Crawley, despite only spending almost £20 million, I do think they've brought in some really, really good players. One I'm really excited about here is Christian Mosquera. Christian Mosquera is a great player, especially for this level. He will be their center back of the future. 16 jumping reach, excellent defensive technical attributes. He is one who's going to be great for them. The other one who I think they've signed who is pretty good is Younes Konak because it is a position they needed. And even though he doesn't have great pace, all of his other attributes I think for this position are really good. The other players they've spent big money on are Oscar Schwartau, pretty good player. He can play up top and in the attacking mid position. I think he's a very good, very well-rounded player. And then finally, Ramon Sosa, who can play out on the width. Again, pretty good player, but I think he's kind of similar to the players that they've already had. It'll be interesting to see how they start them. And even though they haven't spent a whole lot of money, it seems that a lot of the money we're giving them is going into the wages. Again, in the championship, they're spending £110,000 per week on Kamari Doyle. He's a really good player. He's one who they got at the end of part one. But 110K for him, 105K for Mosquera, 105K for Lamar Bogarde here. They're spending a lot of money on their best players. Hopefully these are the players that will lead them into the Prem. But it hasn't been a great start to the season. Overall, it's been pretty mid to start. They were good in the first two matches, but since then haven't been able to win a game. Overall, that puts them into 12th place in the Skybet Championship at the moment. So they're looking very mid-table. But the season preview has them down in 15th at the moment. So I suppose that's kind of where they're expected to finish. So we'll see how they do this season. I'll send forward through the season here. Let's see how they do. Season 7. And Season 7 sees Crawley finish in 16th place. I believe that is a slightly backward step from last season. Last season they were in 15th. This season they're in 16th. So despite all the money we're throwing at them, they really haven't improved these two seasons. Looking at the schedule, I mean, pretty mid overall. Not a great December. Good January. This was their end to the season. In March, they were actually doing all right, and then they didn't win again until the last game of the season. Let's look at the past positions here. Crawley's past positions. Man, they were actually they were as sixth at one point. They were ninth until that terrible run where they just kept falling down the table, ended up in 16th or so. So maybe there is some potential in this squad. They just were so poor to end the season. Gelhart for them was a little bit better. I mean, getting 12 goals, but we still not seeing a 20 goal a season striker. Kamari Doyle, who they're paying a ton of money to, not doing great. Ramon Sosa, new signing, not doing great. Looks like Evan Clark. I mean, he got 2 goals for them, but really not starting any matches, just coming off the bench. So nobody really outstanding this season for Crawley. I'm going to be honest with you all, I don't really know what to do at this point. We've got £157 million in the transfer budget. Obviously, we're going to give as much of that as we can to Crawley. But other than throwing money at them, I'm not really sure what we can do. It's hard to loan them players, and honestly, at this point, I don't really even know who we'd want to give them. There aren't a lot of great prospects here and the under 21s. Divin Mubama doesn't really want to go to them anymore, and I've been trying to sell him to them, but he doesn't want to go to Crawley. We don't have a whole lot of other options here who Crawley would be really good with. It's been hard to do these part exchange deals. It's been hard to get more players on loan to them now. Even though they're in the championship, it just seems like not a whole lot of my players want to go to Crawley. So this is really difficult as we move into season 8, but we'll continue throwing money at them. We'll see what happens. All right, we are at the end of the season 8 transfer window, and the big news here is we have a new head coach. Hassan Suleiman has taken a position at Cardiff. So he has moved on from Crawley. He is no longer the head coach, which he did a great job at the club. We will miss him. But now we've got Neil Harris who's come in, and he is going to play a different style. Looks like his preferred formation is a 4-4-2. His preferred tactical style is wing play. So that is what we will see now implemented at Crawley, something completely different from before. With that in mind, I've decided to take a little bit of a new approach here with Crawley here. We got 3 seasons left of this rebuild. And something that I think is maybe hampering them from being able to sign new players is the wage, because they're paying a lot of money to a lot of people in their wage, which means it's hard to get rid of people because they're on such a high wage. They're not going to want to leave Crawley. So what I've decided to do is sign some of their decent players and then loan them back to Crawley for a season so that they don't have to pay their wages. But I've done this with their squad players because I don't want to take their best players away from them for the rest of the save. You can only loan them back for one season. So we've brought in, for example, Cozier Dewberry here. He's definitely a squad player for them, a good squad player, but he's definitely a squad player. He's someone they can replace, and they've got him back for this season for free. I've also taken off the wages of Lewis Nielsen, who for whatever reason was actually transfer listed. So he was going to leave the club anyway, and there were clubs interested in him. But I've bought him and loaned them back because I do think that he's a player that is good for them. We have again bought him in for £15 million, and Crawley is not playing any of that contract. Other than that, of course, £125 million have gone in to Crawley for them to make a lot of signings. They haven't made as many signings as I think I would have liked, but I think the signings they have brought in are of decently high quality. Colin McKenna is no longer at the club, so they've signed Nikola Vasilj, who comes in as a very good goalkeeper. Even though he's old, I think this is a phenomenal goalkeeper for them to bring in. I think he's a player that could start for them. They've then signed Stefan Bonney for £3 million, a really, really good squad player, I think, someone who can play in the central midfield. I think he's a really good player. I like him a lot, and he's young, so he will improve. Then they've shelled out about £13 million on Ali Al-Hamadi. Gonna be honest, I don't think this is a very good signing. I think it's a little bit disappointing to have spent £13 million on him, but hopefully he proves me wrong. They spent another $3 million or so on Romain Esse. Again, I think he's okay. I think they could be spending their money in better places. Caio Henrique, I think, is a much better signing. He's 34, so they're really going to have him for one season. But I think he's a very, very good player. This is an excellent signing. Finally, they've brought in Ovi Ejeheri as a new goalkeeper. And again, they've done a really good job at signing goalkeepers here. I think Ejeheri is a fantastic goalkeeper. I like the fact that they've brought him in. I just think it's in the attacking positions they haven't done so well with. But tactically, this is how it looks like they're going to be setting up. Again, it's going to be a 4-4-2 formation. And we do have Lewis Nielsen starting here, so I think that's a good signing. Jed Spence, an interesting player. He'll be starting as a right mid. I don't know if he's a great right mid, but he'll be starting in the right mid positions. Max Bird is someone who I think could potentially be important for them. And then, of course, we do have new signing Al-Hamadi starting up top. So it'll be interesting to see how this 4-4-2 does. The start of Season 8, though, has been mixed once again. It's just been kind of an average start, 2 wins. And as far as the championship is concerned, they are sitting in 12th place at the moment. So it does seem like, once again, we're veering towards a mid-table finish. I am also going to add that something that's surprisingly tough about trying to rebuild a completely different club is I have poured pretty much all of Man City's resources into helping out Crawley, which means that right now I haven't rebuilt this squad very well. City are currently in 12th. I have no idea how this season is going to go, but the team definitely isn't as good as it used to be just because I'm not signing as many players. I'm worried that next season I'm going to have to focus on signing players for City and not being able to spend as much on Crawley. But we'll see how this season does. Hopefully we can win the league, which is the minimum expectation for the club. But yeah, this is really getting into a tough part of this rebuild. I mean, we're 8 seasons in, and I've spent most of the money on Crawley. At this point, we're just throwing money at Crawley, and apparently not doing so well to start this season with City. So that being said, I got to keep tabs on City now to see how we do, but let's move forward to the end of Season 8, and we'll see how things are looking then. Well, at the conclusion of Season 8, this is the first season that we have not won the league with Man City. It has not been the best go. We've got knocked out in the quarterfinal Champions League, knocked out in the FA Cup. We did win the Community Shield and Carabao Cup, but we haven't won anything that we really wanted, which does mean, looking at the club vision right now, we are at a C. So if we have another bad season, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but we do have, for this upcoming season, 150 mil in the transfer budget. Maybe I'll have to sell some players, but it's going to be difficult to try and mix Crawley and City right now. We have seen some improvement under Neil Harris's management. Crawley now finishing in 10th place. So overall, we're seeing a little bit of improvement, moving further up the table. And we're starting to see some better goal outputs from the forward players. Joe Gelhardt getting 15 goals, and Josh Coburn getting 16 goals. So it's nice to see that some of those forward players now are doing a lot better. I think this is the highest goal totals we've seen in part two of this rebuild. So that is something we like to see. But as you can see here, Al Hamadi, they spent a lot of money for a player that only got them 7 league goals. And looking at their schedule here, no real bad patches, just no real great patches, but fairly consistent throughout the season, I think. So, 10th place seems about right. So as we move into season 9 here, I think the move here is going to be, they have some players who are listed. Koulibaly is listed, Manhoef is listed, who are on huge salaries. So I think the move is going to be to continue paying for those players, helping to get them off the wage bill, maybe even loaning them back if we think they can contribute to Crawley. And then hopefully they'll be able to bring in some new players. But I'm going to play through once again the transfer window. And I think that's going to be the strategy for this upcoming season. All right, we have moved through the transfer window. We are at the beginning of season 9. So 2 more seasons left in this rebuild, season 9 and season 10. And I've spent a lot of money for Man City because I've had to rebuild them. So I perhaps haven't spent as much money as I would have liked on Crawley. But I spent 138 million on Valentin Barco. I've spent 126 million on this guy, Antonio Alvarez. I've spent 77 million on Paul Vonner. So that is a lot of money that I haven't been able to give to Crawley. So once again here, we have a really good team for City. But what I'm realizing that's really tough about a rebuild like this is that you spend so much time and resources for Crawley. I haven't done any scouting. I haven't done anything for City. So I don't even know who the players are at this point in the game. I mean, I'm still relying on players like Erling Haaland, who are getting really old. Players like Musiala, who fortunately is still all right. Players like Jude Bellingham, who fortunately is still all right. But at the end of the 10 seasons, I'm definitely going to have to call this because I don't think I'll be able to keep up with everything for City and Crawley. So we will be finishing it at the end of 10 seasons. There's not going to be a part 3 for this. This is really, really difficult once you get into the latter stages of trying to rebuild a club that's not even your own. But that being said, I have sold a lot of players. You can see 311 million on the out here, 117 million on the out here. And that has allowed us to help out Crawley, hopefully quite a bit. We've still given them 157 million pounds. If they can't do it with 157 million pounds, I don't know what to do anymore. We're just throwing money at them essentially. So we have continued with the strategy of signing their players and getting them off the wage bill and then giving them back to them. We've done that with 2 players here. Million Manhoef here. He is a player on a huge salary for them. We've loaned him back to the club. So once again, I mean, he's making 73K for us. Fortunately, Crawley isn't paying any of that. And we've also signed Ismaila Koulibaly here, but I don't actually think is maybe that great for them at this point. He was getting old too, so I wanted to make sure as an older player those 2 guys are, we got them off the wage bill so they don't have to worry about that anymore. But again, he's making 59K for us. He was making about the same amount of money for Crawley. We've given them a huge, huge burden off of their wage bill. But once again, though, they haven't spent a whole lot of money, only 17.5 million pounds. I feel like they could be spending more. Most of the money was spent on Tom Darlington here, young center back with very good physicals. They spent the most money, 13 million pounds here on Samuel Justo, who I think is a really good central midfielder. This is probably one of the best signings we've seen from them during the entirety of this rebuild. And then finally, Adam Ellison, who once again is a very good physicals player. Plays in the wingback role. I don't know if he's brilliant though. So this means that moving into the second to last season, it's still a pretty similar side to the one that we saw last season. The biggest change maybe is Zion Fleming coming in, who, I mean, he's okay. He's one that we saw before, but now he's playing up top, a bit slow. And then of course, Peter Hyangya here, who I think is someone that I missed, who they must have brought in on loan from Leicester. Good player. We'll see how he does with them this season. But again, season 9 has kind of produced a mid-start, a lot of draws in there along with a couple of wins. It does put them 8th as far as the table is concerned, but I mean, essentially they're a mid-table side at this point. Sunderland and Cardiff are absolutely running away with it comparatively. But hopefully, maybe we can sneak them into the playoff positions. I'd love to see them get into the playoff positions, just so we can see some sort of improvement. I mean, we're 3 seasons into part 2 here, and we haven't really gotten them past mid-table. But again, at this point, we've used all the transfer budget at City. There's really nothing else I can do. Season number 9, second to last season. Let's see how this one goes. Well, at the conclusion of season 9, fortunately, we've gotten City back to where we should be. So we will have a season 10. We will be in the job for the season 10. So that's really important. But the question is, of course, how did Crawley do? And what I've looked at for Crawley here is they have a new manager, Ian Barclough. He plays a different style. He's a 4-2-3-1. When did they change managers? So Neil Harris was fired. Then after that, Matt Hale came in as an interim and Ian Barclough left. So Matt Hale was fired November 8th. So let's take a look at their schedule. They finished 9th, by the way, if you guys can see that up here. So I'm surprised that Neil Harris was fired. I mean, he doesn't even, honestly, compared to how they've done previous seasons, he would have been fired with this 2-1 loss to Bristol City. And they weren't doing that bad, but it looks like in the latter part of the season, they improved. Oh, wow. They were actually doing really bad with Neil Harris. They were down in 20th. So around November, yeah, it would have been around in this position. And then they had massive improvements. This Crawley team should have been much better. I mean, this shows. I'll tell you what, if they can take this form into the final season of this rebuild, they might have a shot at getting promoted. I mean, that is a huge jump in form. Wow. So Crawley here finishing in 9th, and even after how poor they were at the beginning of the season, they were only 6 points, 5 points off, potentially making it into the playoff spot. So I'll tell you what, there might be some hope here for Crawley as we move into the final season of this rebuild. They didn't bring anyone else in January either, so that was purely the squad we saw earlier. And if we look at the league stats, how did everyone do? Still missing goals up top. I think that's the biggest issue, is they're still missing some goals up top. I wish they would accept some of my loans, or some of that my part exchange deals would go to them. I've been trying to give them some more players. It's just no one's really interested in going to Crawley, or Crawley isn't really interested in the players that I'm trying to give them. Well, we have one final season under a new head coach. Can Ian Barclough lead Crawley to the Prem? Well, moving into the beginning of season 10, I have thrown everything I possibly can at Crawley. £162 million for them. We've actually given them a loan. I've been saying this whole time we need to get them a striker. I've given them Maxime Navarro, who is a wonder kid forward. We signed him a few seasons ago from Lyon. We have finally got him to Crawley, but he is a very good striker. I'm hoping he will do bits for them. 16 finishing, 13 composure, 12 off the ball, good pace. I'm hoping he can get the goals to fire them up to the Prem. If you guys remember Ovia Jahari too, he is a player who was on huge wages. He's also 30 years old. Again, this is the final season of the rebuild. We are going all out. We are taking his nearly £100,000 per week contract, giving him back to Crawley to start for them. And Christian Mosquera, he was one of their highest earners. We have signed him. We've given him back to them. They're not paying that £100,000 per week contract. The only bad news is he is injured. He's out for 3 to 7 weeks with a hip injury, but hopefully he will do well for them for the rest of the season. Also, in case you guys are wondering why I didn't sign more of their players and then loan them back to them, the biggest reason for that is because they've already got the 3 loans. I can't loan them that many players. So we're trying to stay within the confines of how many players I am allowed to loan back to them. But they've spent more money than we've seen in previous seasons, £36.5 million. They spent $10 million here on Mark Pubel, who's all right. I mean, he's good. I don't know if he's great though, but Pubel comes in. They spent $7 million on Nathan Baxter here, a new goalkeeper, who I think is very good. Crawley's been very good at signing keepers. Just wish they could sign strikers the same way as well. Finley McAllister comes in. I mean, he's all right. I wish his technicals were a little bit better. They spent $3 million here on James Long. I think James Long is a really good player. I think that's an exciting wingback to bring in. See, they've also brought in John Michael Yule. He's a player who can play out wide. He's a good young player. I just don't know if he's going to help them right now, but he'll definitely be good for the future. They also brought back Sam Amaya on a free £50,000 per week for him, but he's a very good player. And finally, they've spent about $7 million on Jared Jessup. Again, I think he's a good young player at 21. He's going to be really good. I just don't know if he's the quality right now to lead them into the Prem. I thought they were playing a 4-2-3-1, but here we're seeing kind of a 5-3-2 type formation. So I guess this is what Barclough has them rolling out going into the final season of this rebuild. But that being said, going into the final season here, it looks like it's working. They haven't lost a match yet. They've got 2 draws. But overall, they've made the Carabao Cup 4th round beating Leeds. They've had a good start to the Sky Bet Championship season. And they're currently in 3rd. They've had a very good start to the season. The question will be, can they keep this up? Final season of the rebuild. Can they get promoted to the Prem? Oh, we were so close to getting them into the Prem. Looks like they were knocked out in the playoffs. They were 4 points off of an automatic promotion place. But it just wasn't enough. Looking at the schedule here, they were knocked out in the semifinals to Norwich. Man, and they had a bad end to the season. If we had had a better March here, they would have done it. I mean, they were brilliant to start the season. Not a very good September, but brought things back up, and just 2 poor runs are the reason they couldn't get automatic promotion. Looking at the squad, Maxime Navarro, a player who I would have loved to have seen do well for them, but only 5 goals. That was not the performance I was hoping for when giving them someone on loan. But Joe Gelhart did really good. Looks like Prideaux did good. Kamari Doyle had a really good season for them. Just overall, not enough to fire Crawley into the Prem. Also, looking at their facilities, it's pretty much remained the same. Doesn't look like they've spent any of that money in their facilities. However, they have planned infrastructure changes. They are moving into a new stadium, a much bigger stadium. 17,000 capacity, I believe. Yeah, now they've got a 9K. So hopefully that'll help them bring in more money in the long run. Well, I gotta say, 10 seasons in, this is a really, really difficult challenge. It's really hard because at this point I felt like we were just kind of throwing money at Crawley, but it was both a curse and helping them, because even though we were throwing a bunch of money at Crawley, but they were using most of that money to bring in players on a high salary. But then overall, that eventually led to they had so many players on a high salary. It just seems like they weren't able to totally change the squad, totally improve the squad, because they had these players on a high salary, so they couldn't get rid of them, which meant that we had to change what we were doing and signing their high salary players who they might want to phase out, and then hoping that they bring in the right players eventually. This was a much more difficult challenge with the team in the championship. Again, I really, really want to try this with an affiliate club where we have a little bit more control of the players who we can give to them, rather than just kind of hoping that Crawley signs our players. It was just really difficult because at this point in the championship and at this point in the save, they didn't really want, like, I was offering them players on loan. I was offering them players for transfers. They weren't taking them up on the bid, maybe because the player wasn't interested or the club wasn't interested. I also tried to do more part exchange deals, but other than that one Evan Clark deal, we just couldn't get any other ones over the line. And speaking of which, Evan Clark isn't even at Crawley anymore. He was signed for 54K from Bristol Rovers. So, I mean, I guess really the only thing that came out of that was they got another £15 million in that exchange. But what we're going to do now, we've gone 10 seasons in. I am going to fast forward a couple of years into the future just to see how Crawley did without my intervention. I'm going to resign from being the city manager. I got to tell you guys, it is hard. This is really, really difficult to do. We've won the league with City this year, but I don't know if I can look at another City job here. So I'm going to resign from manager. Let's go into the future and see how Crawley did. All right, we are 3 years into the future, and we are going to see what happened to Crawley. But I've just been distracted by something because under the available jobs list here, I see Man City. And what happened to their season is that they finished in eighth place. This is what I mean about it having been so hard once you get further down, is that it's just hard to continuously rebuild the squad. That's wild. They finished in eighth. They're still in the Europa League, though, which means they would have won something. They actually made the champion. They lost in the Champions League final. They got two red cards in the Champions League final. So even though they finished eighth, they were still in the. That's wild. So did they? They did not. They did win the Carabao Cup final, so that would be why they are still in a Europa League spot. But yeah, there it is. They do not currently have a head coach. So this season they finished eighth. Last season they didn't win the league either. They finished second behind Spurs. And then they did win the league the first season after. Yeah, this makes sense. The team was aging. It was hard to rebuild. It would have costed a lot of money to rebuild. So I'm not surprised to see them doing so poorly. And shout out to Spurs. 2 league wins in a row. But of course, the real question is, how did Crawley do? And they have a new head coach in Damien Duff. Wow, interesting to see them there. He plays 4-2-3-1 though, so nothing too dissimilar to what we might have seen previously. Damien Duff is a name I haven't heard in a long time, man. But looking at the Sky Bet Championship, they are still there. Crawley finished 12th in the championship last season. The season before that, where are they? They finished 7th. They actually did pretty good. 7th, and then they finished in 16th. So the year after we finished up the rebuild, they finished 16th. They got back up to 7th, and then they finished 12th. So really, they're a solid mid-table side in the championship now, but they don't look any closer. If anything, maybe even a little bit further away from actually getting promoted into the Prem. Oh man. And it seems like now that we're not giving them all of that money, they're struggling. Looking at the finances here, they are under a transfer embargo due to breach of financial regulations. I'm going to imagine that has something to do, yeah, with the ridiculous wages they're still paying players. Yeah, now that we're not giving them a lot of money, it is a lot more difficult for them to stay afloat. That being said, though, excellent training facilities and excellent youth facilities. So I think that's been improved since we've been away. They're in a new stadium with over 17,000 capacity, but academy coaching and youth recruitment are still quite poor. And then this was their most recent season. They didn't get very far in the Carabao Cup. And how they doing? And they lost in the FA Cup third round. Yeah, this is not the greatest form in the world. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess at the end of this, we've gotten Crawley promoted once, and we've solidified them as kind of a mid-table side with in the championship with financial issues now. Well, that is all that I've got for this rebuild. I think we're definitely going to do this again. I've learned a lot from this rebuild. I've learned a lot. So we'll definitely try this again with some new strategies. Definitely going to try this with an affiliate club because I think that'll be a lot of fun. But again, this is everything for this Crawley rebuild. I hope you all are doing well. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you all very soon. Bye.